There exists within the human heart a sacred alchemy, a divine transformation that occurs not through elaborate rituals or complex philosophies, but through the utterance of a single word. This word, when spoken with the full conviction of the soul, when breathed with the entirety of one's being, possesses the miraculous capacity to transmute the leaden weight of suffering into the golden radiance of spiritual strength. That word is surrender. Before we begin, let's pause the moment. If you enjoy this video, hit subscribe button so you don't miss any video inspired by Yogananda's teaching. Thank you very much. For years, I wandered through the valleys of my own resistance, carrying upon my shoulders the accumulated burdens of disappointment, loss, and unfulfilled desires. Like so many souls who walk this earthly plane, I believed that strength meant holding firm, that power resided in my ability to control, to manipulate circumstances, to bend the universe to my will through sheer force of determination. I clenched my fists around my plans, my expectations, my vision of how life should unfold, and in that very grasping, I found only greater anguish. The tighter I held, the more life seemed to slip through my fingers like water, leaving me parched and desperate in a desert of my own making. The pain I experienced was not merely physical, though there were certainly moments when my body bore the marks of stress and tension. It was a deeper pain, a soul pain that penetrated to the very core of my existence. It was the pain of separation from the divine, the agony of believing myself to be alone in an indifferent universe, the torment of thinking that my small ego self must somehow navigate the infinite complexities of existence without guidance, without support, without the loving hand of God to lead me through the darkness. In my suffering, I cried out to the Divine Mother, to the Infinite Father, to that supreme consciousness that pervades all creation. My prayers were often desperate pleas for specific outcomes, for the removal of particular obstacles, for the granting of certain desires. I prayed as one who still believed that I knew better than God what I needed, what would serve my highest good, what would bring me lasting happiness. And when my prayers seemed to go unanswered, when circumstances did not bend to my will, my pain only deepened, and with it came resentment, doubt, and a creeping sense of abandonment. But the divine, in its infinite wisdom and boundless compassion, was teaching me the most profound lesson of all. Through every disappointment, through every closed door, through every shattered expectation, I was being guided toward the one truth that would set me free. I was being led, though I did not yet know it, toward the transformative power of surrender. Surrender is perhaps the most misunderstood word in the spiritual vocabulary. To the worldly mind, surrender suggests defeat, weakness, a passive acceptance of circumstances that should be fought against and overcome. The ego recoils at the very notion, interpreting surrender as a kind of spiritual suicide, a dissolution of the self that it has worked so hard to construct and defend. But true surrender, as taught by the great masters and revealed through direct experience of the divine, is something altogether different. It is not the surrender of a defeated soldier laying down arms before a conquering enemy. It is the surrender of a child falling into the arms of a loving parent, knowing with absolute certainty that those arms will catch and hold and never let go. When I finally understood this distinction, when the truth of surrender penetrated not merely my intellect but the deepest chambers of my heart, everything changed. The transformation did not happen all at once, for the ego is a stubborn adversary, clinging to its illusions even as they crumble. But gradually, through practice and prayer, through meditation and the grace of the divine, I learned to release my grip on how I thought life should be and to open myself to how life actually is, to how God is orchestrating every moment for my ultimate spiritual evolution. The practice of surrender began in small ways. When faced with a frustration, instead of immediately reacting with anger or anxiety, I would pause, take a breath, and silently offer the situation to God. Divine Mother, I would pray, I do not understand why this is happening, but I trust that you do. I surrender this circumstance to your wisdom, Show me what you would have me learn. Guide me to respond in a way that serves my highest good and the good of all. At first, these words felt hollow, a mere formula I was repeating without genuine conviction. But I persisted, and slowly, something began to shift within me. I noticed that when I surrendered a problem rather than wrestling with it, solutions often appeared that I could never have imagined on my own. Doors opened where I had seen only walls. People appeared in my life at precisely the moment I needed them, offering help, guidance, or simply a word of encouragement. Circumstances that had seemed like disasters revealed themselves, in time, to be blessings in disguise, redirecting me away from paths that would have led to greater suffering and toward opportunities for growth and joy that I could never have orchestrated through my own limited understanding. More importantly, I discovered that surrender brought an immediate sense of peace, regardless of external circumstances. When I released my attachment to specific outcomes and placed my trust in the divine plan, the anxiety that had been my constant companion began to dissolve. The knot of tension in my chest loosened. The racing thoughts that had kept me awake at night quieted. In their place arose a profound sense of being held, supported, loved by a presence far greater than my small self, a presence that had been there all along, waiting patiently for me to stop struggling and simply rest in its embrace. This is the great paradox of surrender. In giving up control, we gain true power. Not the false power of the ego, which seeks to dominate and manipulate, but the authentic power that flows from alignment with the divine will. When we surrender, we become channels for a force infinitely greater than ourselves. We tap into the creative intelligence that governs the movement of galaxies and the unfolding of flowers, the same intelligence that knows exactly what we need in each moment for our spiritual evolution. I began to see that every pain I had experienced, every disappointment and loss, had been an invitation to surrender more deeply. The universe was not punishing me or abandoning me. It was calling me home to my true nature, to the realization that I am not a separate, isolated ego struggling alone, but an eternal soul, a beloved child of the divine, forever held in the heart of God. My suffering had been the result of my resistance to this truth, my insistence on maintaining the illusion of separation and control. As my practice of surrender deepened, I noticed changes not only in my inner state but in my outer life as well. Relationships that had been sources of conflict began to heal as I released my need to be right, to have things my way, to control how others behaved. I found myself responding to difficult people and situations with greater patience and compassion, seeing them not as obstacles to my happiness but as teachers, as opportunities to practice surrender and to extend love even in challenging circumstances. My work took on new meaning and effectiveness as I learned to surrender the fruits of my actions, to do my best in each moment without attachment to recognition, success, or specific results. This paradoxically made me more effective, more creative, more able to serve, because I was no longer working from a place of ego-driven striving but from a place of divine inspiration and guidance. Even my meditation practice was transformed by surrender. For years, I had approached meditation as another task to be mastered, another arena in which to achieve and excel. I would sit with gritted determination, trying to force my mind into stillness, becoming frustrated when thoughts arose, judging myself harshly for my perceived failures. But when I learned to surrender in meditation, to simply offer myself to the divine and allow whatever arose to arise without resistance or judgment, meditation became not a struggle but a homecoming, a sweet reunion with the beloved who dwells in the cave of the heart. The word surrender became my mantra, my prayer, my constant companion. In moments of fear, I would whisper it like a sacred incantation, "I surrender." In times of confusion, when I did not know which path to take, I would offer the decision to God, "I surrender this choice to you. Guide me according to your will." In periods of grief and loss, when the pain seemed unbearable, I would breathe the word into my heart, "I surrender this pain to you. Transform it according to your divine alchemy. And always, always the divine responded. Not always in the ways I expected or wanted, but always in ways that, in retrospect, I could see were perfect, were exactly what I needed for my growth and evolution. Sometimes the response was immediate and dramatic. Other times it was subtle, a gentle shift in perspective, a quiet knowing that arose from within. But never was I left alone. Never was my surrender met with silence or indifference. I came to understand that surrender is not a one-time event but a continuous practice, a moment-by-moment choice to release control and trust in the divine plan. Each day brings new opportunities to surrender. The small irritations and inconveniences, the larger disappointments and losses, the persistent fears and doubts that arise in the mind. Each of these is an invitation to practice the sacred alchemy, to speak the word that transforms pain into power. The power that comes from surrender is not the power to control external circumstances, though paradoxically, as we surrender, we often find that circumstances align more harmoniously with our true needs. Rather, it is the power to remain centered and peaceful regardless of what is happening around us. It is the power to love unconditionally, to serve selflessly, to face life's challenges with courage and grace. It is the power that comes from knowing, with unshakable certainty, that we are never alone, that we are always held in the loving embrace of the divine, that nothing can ultimately harm our eternal soul. This power sustained me through trials that once would have broken me. When illness came, I surrendered my body to God's healing grace and found strength I did not know I possessed. When relationships ended, I surrendered my grief and discovered that love is not diminished by loss but expanded, that the heart has infinite capacity to love and to heal. When my plans crumbled, I surrendered my attachment to specific outcomes and found myself guided to opportunities more wonderful than anything I could have imagined. Through it all, the practice of surrender has taught me that pain is not the enemy I once believed it to be. Pain is a messenger, a teacher, a sacred catalyst for transformation. When we resist pain, when we fight against it or try to numb ourselves to it, we only prolong our suffering. But when we surrender into pain, when we allow ourselves to fully feel it while simultaneously offering it to the divine, something miraculous happens. The pain does not necessarily disappear, but it is transmuted. It becomes a doorway to deeper compassion, greater wisdom, more profound love. I think of the lotus flower, that ancient symbol of spiritual awakening, which grows from the mud at the bottom of the pond, pushing up through murky water to finally bloom in radiant beauty above the surface. The lotus does not resist the mud. It uses it as the very substance from which it grows. So too can we use our pain, our struggles, our darkest moments as the raw material for our spiritual blossoming, but only when we surrender them to the transformative power of the divine. Today, when I speak the word surrender, it is not with resignation or defeat, but with joy and gratitude. It is a word of power, a word of liberation, a word that opens the floodgates of divine grace. It is the word that has turned my pain into power, my weakness into strength, my despair into hope. It is the word that has brought me home to myself, to God, to the truth of who I really am beneath all the layers of ego and illusion. To anyone who is suffering, who is struggling, who feels overwhelmed by the challenges of life, I offer this simple wisdom: surrender, not to the circumstances themselves, but to the divine presence that holds you always. Trust that you are loved beyond measure, that your life has meaning and purpose, that every experience, no matter how painful, is serving your highest good. Release your grip on how you think things should be and open yourself to the infinite possibilities of how they might be when guided by divine wisdom. This is the alchemy of surrender. It transforms our relationship to everything. We no longer see ourselves as victims of circumstance, but as beloved children of God, always held, always guided, always loved. We no longer experience pain as meaningless suffering, but as sacred opportunity for growth and transformation. We no longer feel powerless in the face of life's challenges, but empowered by our connection to the infinite power of the divine. One word: surrender. It is the key that unlocks the door to peace, to joy, to authentic spiritual power. It is the word that has changed my life, and it can change yours too. Speak it with faith, practice it with devotion, live it with your whole heart, and watch as your pain is transformed into power, your suffering into strength, your darkness into light.